six. So for the most part, it's the planning commission that makes those determinations.
And as far as what Maury's trying to do here, having served on the planning commission, you do have a lot of disgruntled people that come in and say, well, I bought this piece of property, I didn't know that I couldn't do this, and this was my retirement savings, and this was gonna be my dreams and hopes, and now I can't do this because they say I can, but yet it wasn't on the map when I bought it, and et cetera. So, I mean, I see the validity in doing this, because you do have a lot of sad stories that do come in.
I've got some questions. So why wouldn't it already be noted on the map right now?
It is already noted in
That's
the
what I
map.
thought, okay.
So what's happening is, between our subdivision ordinance and our zoning ordinance, there's nothing that really says, yeah, we mean what we say, and so it's not operative unless we say so in our legislation.
So, okay. Because I thought it is already noted, okay. Anyhow, I got, so some of my questions, like on the opening page, under summary, second sentence, or second line, it says the ordinance would make it clear that the board of supervisors and planning commission each have the authority to establish conditions of approval for projects and require that said conditions be notated on the final map. But then I was asking myself, I mean, don't we already have that authority?
You do. The challenge is if there's no operative language in our zoning ordinance and our subdivision ordinance that reflect what that note means, it's ambiguous to some, not to Supervisor Chapman or Hammond, but to some that might want to be litigious and argue that there's no operative language that says that means anything. Unlike in subdivision ordinance where we have certain rules, a sidewalk will be this, a road will be that, a parcel must do this. There's nothing in there that says a note on the map is operative unless otherwise. So it's silent to notes on maps, essentially.
Well, if I can interject on that, but what I find is startling when you make that statement is when you take a document and you go and record it, and that document, defines the boundaries and has all the things that are required by law, and it has these notes on there saying that this is an area not to, you have, what is it on your memo here, where you talk about the disturbance, we have set-asides for, you can't use it for septics, you got an easement maybe defined across one part, and you actually have restrictions based on that process that it went through. And to say that by, recording the document means something, and what you're saying by this proposed ordinance is that recording the document doesn't mean anything.
Well, an easement is associated with another recorded document, so that has some
Well, maybe
other
the easement
validity.
was a poor choice, but we have, this area is not a buildable area because we have concerns about, septics, or we have, well, like, we have some lots where, the density requirements, so you create a big lot, but you can only have so much density per acres, and in order to maintain that, you can build on this 20%, but you can't build on that 80%. Those are the kind of things that are noted on these maps, and those are conditions that came forward as a part of either the environmental review or the public review. And what I'm saying is that when you go and actually record the document and the notations there, that's the way you seal the deal. That's the way you validate, what those requirements are. And now you're telling me that those requirements aren't valid.
No.
Unless we have this ordinance.
Let me,
I just don't buy that argument.
Let me just say this. I'm not saying that. I have operated under the premise that they mean something for the last 20 years, and it has only recently come to my attention through somebody who presumably knows more than me about land use, that there is a chink in the armor.
Sounds like, to me, it sounds like he's got too much time on his hands to be theorizing like that.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, I think the point that Mr. Anderson is trying to make is that we do have these restrictions that are recorded as notes on maps, and probably the best example is a buffer for agriculture purposes or something of that nature. That note is physically on the map, and it might have a line that shows a 20, 30, whatever foot buffer. But when a map gets recorded on top of that, for example, another subsequent map, if that gets left off for whatever reason, then there is a dispute whether or not that previous condition that was imposed by the board carries through to a future map. think the purpose of this ordinance is to really just clarify and provide further disclosure to a potential purchaser or a potential further subdivider, that there is a restriction on that map.
That is a component of this, but I would argue too that there are those litigating issues right now, just straight out, we don't think your note means anything because you don't have any operative language in your ordinances.
And the fact that we, you know, if we were proposing that we say we mean what we say through this ordinance, if we don't do that, then I guess the argument could be made, well, maybe, I guess you didn't mean what you said.
Well, Mr. Chairman, let me ask a question to County Council. When a board or commission approves something that's conditionally approved, it's in the minutes that it's conditionally approved, that you can do this if you do A, B, C, and D. Whether it's noted on the map or not, the conditional approval is based upon complying with those requirements. In most cases, when you have those kind of conditions, oftentimes they will manifest themselves by being on the map as such. I mean, noted on the map so that people know there's an exclusion area here, there's this requirement there, whatever, based upon that conditional approval that was made by the body responsible. So now we're saying that, in essence, if it's not on the map, and then let's say maybe a future map is created, and maybe the discussion in 2010, you know, is far different than the discussion that was held in 1990. And maybe the leadership in 2010 thinks it's okay to do that, where in 1990 the folks at that time didn't think it was a good thing to do. And so a new map is created, and if it doesn't include those conditions, you know, being continued forward, and then in essence you basically repealed it. So if you have a newer map that doesn't have the conditions that would supersede an older map, I would say the newer map was the one that prevails. And if you're trying to retroactively go back and dig up some condition from 1940 and say now that that's going to be the governing decision, even though there's been subsequent action taken, then in essence repeals that. I just don't see how you can do that.
That's not what I'm proposing, and I don't think that's what this
Well,
means.
that's how this can be utilized, and I just don't feel that that's the way to conduct business.
And I will just, and I'm not trying to, I think this is a good
Because
discussion.
whether there's a notation on the map or not, if there's a conditional approval and the condition is no, you can't do this, and you go out there and you start doing it whether it's on the map or not, you're violating the condition of the approval, which to me, is subject to having that approval rescinded for failing to meet the requirements of the approval. So you're creating all kinds of back doors for those kind of exceptions, I think.
I would just, this is kind of philosophical, but our authority flows from the Constitution. It allows us to create these things called, the guiding ordinances. But at the end of the day, that's all well and good, but a lot of what we do and what we don't do is a result of case law. And I think that's what Mr. Curtis is, guarding us against. When things happen, we still have to plug the holes. Just because we have the authority and it looks great on paper that we have all this authority, but if it's not working in the court system, it's not working.
Well, if a court wants to override a decision by a legislative body, it will do so. So all the conditions can be applied all you want. You can have as many notes or non-notes on maps that can be filed. You can have all the ordinances you want. And at the end of the day, if the court says, no, you can't restrict somebody in that respect, you're not going to be able to restrict.
Well,
So let the
I'm
courts-
just
let
saying,
the
I got
courts
a
settle it
finger and
and-
foot in this hole right now, and it's where you're right here, and I can plug this hole, and we can not worry about being litigated.
I'd say let the activist judges play legislator and decide what they want, and we just do what we are supposed to be doing.
I just want to, thanks, John, appreciate those comments. I just want to make a few remarks here. The thing, when I read through here, that, like I said, at first when I read the first paragraph, I asked myself, don't we already have the authority? But then all throughout the document, it's almost, it keeps saying that things about if anything of this is, well, I'll refer to the bottom paragraph on page 003. It says, if any section, subsection, sentence, clause, or phase of this ordinance is for any reason held to be unconstitutional and invalid, such decision shall not affect the validity of the remaining portion of the ordinance. I mean, how I read it, you know, is like, well, if part of this is like bogus and we actually can't really be doing it, the rest of it, you know, still stands. And it uses that type of language throughout. It says the Board of Supervisors hereby declares that it would have passed this ordinance at every section, subsection, sentence, clause, or phrase thereof, irrespective of the fact that any one or more sections, subsections, sentences, clauses, or phrases be declared unconstitutional or invalid. Okay, that's one area.
And to be specific to that, Chairman, that's what might be referred to as a very standard severability clause.
Okay.
You'll find that in a lot of legislation, at the bottom, almost always, that says, hey, look, if somebody challenges some portion of it, doesn't mean the whole thing's bad, essentially.
Even if part of it's bad, why vote for it?
I think you guys are making this way too complicated. I don't think it's that.
Yeah,
I think just clarification is all it is.
I'm kind of the opinion that the board has it. I'm happy to relook at it at a later time. I mean, I can't support it right now, my limited knowledge. I don't want to make a mistake for the community, you know, but unknowingly in haste. But I can't support it today, but doesn't mean that I won't try to meet with you and, you know, educate myself and feel comfortable. I don't feel
we have our
comfortable.
council come in and talk to the board about it. That might be beneficial to the.
And then, you know, I was also asking myself that, you know, I mean, there's obviously a lot of money and time and resources, your time, lawyer time, and I was wondering, you know, is this our best interest being served? I don't know, so I'm sorry, I mean.
Well,
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I might suggest that, as Maury did, that we ask Mr. Curtis to give us a better analysis. I view this as an effort to try to avoid future litigation regarding questions that will arise out of these maps. And I would suggest that we re-agendize it, perhaps either get a further analysis from Mr. Curtis, or even have him in person to maybe quantify what he sees as the risks of not having this language enforced.
I'm going to weigh in for just a second with Mr. Egan and say, although this is not my issue, this is being advanced by Building and Planning Services, and I'm going to confess that I'm a little murky on some of this stuff. I view this as something that is being suggested by Mr. Curtis as a result of some litigation that did occur, and being suggested as a prophylactic measure to be taken. What I agree with Mr. Egan on is that perhaps a sufficient job has not been done in explaining the reason why and examples of how that may come to pass. And perhaps if Mr. Curtis could come, or some other suggestion, I think it would be beneficial.
I personally don't think we need to go through the cost of bringing here, but maybe some written example, but I can't, I don't want to make a bad vote. And I don't feel comfortable enough to vote to add this another later.
Mr. Chairman, I suggest we table it till we get some further analysis from Mr. Curtis.
Or take the vote on it today.
Well, I would say at the same time you're requesting that information from Mr. Curtis, I'd like to have the issue of the retroactivity, how it would be applied to the last 40 to 50 years of conditions being placed on maps, how this action, does it undermine the credibility of those previously recorded documents? I mean, I would think not, but then again, I can see the argument being made by a silver-tongued devil who could, you know, persuade the court that this is our admission that the process we had was flawed, so therefore, prior to, you know, July 15, 2014, all the handshakes that were made really were meaningless. So I think we need to be cognizant of that as well. So hopefully that could be part of the analysis. To me, I think a handshake is a handshake. It was worth its weight in gold, and I think that we're making a lot of to-do about nothing.
Let's finish the public hearing. So if there's no more from the board, I'm going to ask the audience if anyone from the audience has any questions on this matter.
Am I recognized?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi. Naomi McCain.
Ione McCain. first, where does the parcel map and where does the subdivision maps, who starts out doing the work? The surveyor does. The surveyor not only goes out and measures the boundary lines of the property, he has to note down there if there's other property corners there, and he has to tie them out. Also, if there's a lot line adjustment, you know, and buildings are out there in the property, they gotta bring it up, make sure that the overhang doesn't go over too far, else they can't get the fire trucks around them or anything like that. He has to make notations of that. And I've even seen where people have had to cut off the eaves of their buildings in order to abide by whatever that the county wants them to do with the fire department. Who does that? The surveyor. The surveyor comes, he comes into the county planning department and he submits his preliminary survey to the county. County surveyor checks it out and says, oh, well, you've got to do A, B, C, D, E, and F, and G. And really sometimes when they come out with their resolutions, which surveyors do come out with their resolutions, then there might be another surveyor that comes along because every surveyor does it differently. You very seldom see it the same, you know. And so what happens is the two surveyors have to somehow come to agreement. If they don't come to agreement, then if one is extremely wrong and has done it inappropriately, then guess who comes in and steps in? It's called the Board of Engineers, Land Surveyors, Geologists. And then the fight starts. They come in and they check everything. They make that surveyor go back in history, 20 years, whatever it is, and they can even argue about the resolution, which is really just the opinion of the surveyor. No one should really argue about it. They should adjust to it. So you guys come in, I'm just saying how complicated this is. And sometimes that map, all of a sudden, it's not important about the distances one way or the other. You know, it becomes, oh, well, this word is wrong, or it's misconstrued this way. And that survey can mount to in court, that you can't stop it, a court action. And it'll cost you, like it's cost me, $150,000. Over what? You know, disagreements of words. And we forget about what's really important here, and that's the survey. And it's really important that that surveyor goes out and does a job for a quoted amount. We'll say, it depends on whether the property's ever been surveyed before, and how many sections you go into. It could be $10,000, $20,000 just for that. You know what I mean? Just to put it down on a piece of paper. We don't need any more of this stuff. You've got other agencies that check it out. So I don't really feel that this should be placed on a map, because it pulls up the process of the recording and the corrections that go through it. It's really complicated already. I say no on it.
Thank you.
Good job.
Okay. This part of the public hearing is for questions on it, so the next part would be asking the public, anyone that's opposed to speak on it, so I think we've covered that. Yeah. No, thank you, but no. I think that, so is there anyone that has questions from the public? Okay, so is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition to the proposal? Anyone from the public that would like to speak in favor? Okay, so we'll bring it back to the board for action. So the action requested is to conduct a public hearing and introduce ordinance number 2014-005. So if there's no more discussion of the board, I think it's appropriate that we take action or no action, or it's either going to pass or fail for.
And Mr. Chairman, I ask you to close the public hearing before you proceed.
Okay. We'll close the public hearing at 11:04.
Thank you.
And, okay. So, do we have a motion to introduce the ordinance?
Well, Mr. Chairman, just from the discussion that was held here today, I think if there's some apprehension, I would move that we table this until a further notice, till after Mr. Egan can talk to Mr. Curtis and get some more clarification and background information and get to the board. So I would just move that we table to a later date.
I would ask, so, is it the the appropriate course of action, would it be to, I understand tabling, but at the same time too, you know, when we bring a thing to the table as we've done today, shouldn't we be taking the vote on what's kind of presented to us now, and if we don't feel we have sufficient thing, or either you just let it fail and another time you bring it up with more stuff, or do you?
There's a matter being presented to you for consideration for introduction as an ordinance. Of course, it's a two-step process. If you don't feel that you have enough information, the matter can be tabled. If you feel you have enough information and don't see in favor of it, you can call the question, and perhaps it passes, perhaps it won't. But it's your prerogative which way you go. You can either table it or address the issue. Did they answer your question, sir?
Yeah. Well, I think as, you know, as chair, I'd be in favor of addressing the issue, and we always have the option to bring it up again with more information, right?
I believe it could be, yes.
I think we put it on the agenda and agendize it, we've had a public hearing.
Now, I guess the point is there is, I don't believe, any requirement that you pass on the question simply because it's been agendized and presented to you for your consideration. I think it can be tabled.
Okay. What's the pleasure of the board?
You've got a motion.
I think I would just do that. Aaron made a motion to table it. I second that motion.
Okay. So that's it's not just passed or against, you could also.
You can table the matter, yes, sir,
Okay, very good.
Yes.
Before the board. you can do
Okay,
that.
very good.
and ask that it be put onto another agenda with more information and reconsidered.
Okay, perfect. So we do have that motion on the floor in a second. Okay, very good. Madam Clerk, would you poll the vote?
Supervisor Chapman?
Well, if you guys want to keep digging and go right ahead, I'll vote aye, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm not convinced of any new information that will change my opinion on the paramount questions.
Supervisor Alba?
Aye.
Supervisor Pyle? Supervisor Hammond?
No.
Supervisor Lassen?
Yeah, I just want to clarify, I think it's an important issue. I'm willing to hear more, but I kind of like them. So for the sake of, yeah, further, whatever, bye-bye. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Maureen. All righty, I believe then we are overdue for the 10:25 recess, so we'll take it under recess. 5 recess.